Welcome everybody to the first edition of the East Coast Tours here in TEW 2020. We're doing day first, as it's time for day's first show of the month, which is Highway to the Danger Zone, which I guess is basically their weekly show to build up to the big shows. So let's get rolling, as it's also the go home show for the first big show of the year, which is Back in Black rather. So let's get rolling. So we start with Johnny Morton, the Dave Unified champion, who talks about, that he has, another title match against JD Morgan at Back in Black, and he's going to prove that he is still the icon of Dave, and that he will, finally take him out. It doesn't matter what Phil Viber or the rest of the suits want. 58 solid promo, and there we go. And then we have our opening match, which is in a bout that Tad didn't have much heat. Antioch Wrestling, Tyrannosaurus Pex defeated Michael Cook in 540 by pinfall to Pexplex. This gets a 37. Cook gets a 16. Pex gets a 41. Crowd didn't want Cook here, even though he does never say die, but he gets a little bit in. But in the end, Tyrannosaurus Pex gets the big pinfall victory. And afterwards, Tex does a cocky promo about how his muscles prove that he is truly the best wrestler, and then that brings out Monty Walker, who basically challenges him to a match at Back in Black to prove that, substance can win over style. And this gets a 40, perfectly solid promo as we continue on. To our next match, this is in a terrible match. The Animals defeated the Hot Bodies in 617. When Big Pat Panda defeated Rodney Hotbody with a Big Cat Bounce, this gets a 30. And yeah, the Animals just sort of run over the Hot Bodies. Big Cat Panda gets a 35. Wolverine gets a 52. Rocky gets a 15, Rodney Hotbody gets a 10, and yeah, just, your basic squash to get over the Animals as a top contender to the Dave Tag Team titles. And then Beatdown afterwards gets a 32. There you go. Then our next match, we're in an abysmal match, Ouch That's Mean, which gets a 16. Officer Hardway defeats JJ Cole in 643 by pinfall the Hard Knock Life. So, back and forth match, but Hardway gets a few big moves to get the advantage. Hardway gets a 24, J. Cole gets a 17, and of course, continuing his violent cock gimmick, Hardway arrests Cole and then beats him down with the baton in the middle of the ring, which gets a 23. Then we have a Chris Crossfield on the ring, and he calls out 411. Once again, the gimmick is basically this is Tommy's dreamer before he had respect from the crowd. So he wants to get in a brawl, and out comes 411, he's 911, that's who he is. Who is happy, and this gets a 33. And then the actual match, unfortunately, 411 defeats Chris Caulfield in 324 by pinfall to chokeslam. This gets a 17. 411 gets a 26, and Caulfield gets a 19. And then afterwards, 411 chokeslams Caulfield again, which gets a 36. Then in a squash, in a terrible match, the current tag team champions in a non-title match, Black Murder defeat Lucas Hale and Tim Tantron. And 459, when Elijah Black pinned Lucas Hale with the Soul Train, this gets a 14. Merce Mikey gets a 31, Elijah Black gets a 31, Tim Tantron gets a 25, and Lucas Hale gets a freaking 7. Jesus. But yeah, 14, again, just a quick squash. And then afterwards, the Darkest Warriors run in and attack the current tag team champions, which gets a 32. So, continuing sort of, the tag team feud. The interesting thing is, all the actual name tag teams are all heels, which I guess sort of makes sense for Dave, but it is kind of hilarious. But regardless, we move on. As in bout had good heat and decent wrestling, Eric Tyler defeats Henry Lee in 12:30 by pinfall. This gets a 58 because Eric Tyler is really goddamn good. As he's, basically, he's his technician, anti-extreme gimmick as Lee tries to brawl, but Tyler, basically, moves out of it, is able, and of course, he doesn't cheat, but he takes full advantage of the rules. He doesn't break hold until 5. It's, uses the ropes to his advantage when he can. But in the end, he hits a big suplex and gets the pinfall victory over Henry Lee, and overall, match itself gets a 58. Eric Tyler gets a 59, and Henry Lee gets a 43. And then Tyler, locks in the hold, submission hold in on our buddy here, Henry Lee. Datsun tries to make the save, but he's waylaid by Vin Tanner as he comes down, and it's a quick beat down on Vin Tanner on Freddie Datsun just a few days before they face off in the ring. And this gets a 51. Then in our main event, which gets a 51, in a decent match, Johnny Martin and Vengeance defeats Kurt Laramie and JD Morgan in 1307 when Vengeance pinned Kurt Laramie with a Vengeance drop. Laramie was just obviously here to draw, but Vengeance kills Laramie. Martin and Morgan, of course, continue to fight. This overall gets a 51. Vengeance gets a 57. Johnny Martin gets a 59. G. Morgan gets a 50. Kurt Limerick gets a 10. And yeah, chaos of the match did help how badly Kurt Limerick was performing. And unfortunately, JD Morgan and Phil Vibert are a very poor combination. But of course, something might change for that in a minute. And then we have the post-show, last segment of the show, where basically, Vengeance, chokeslams Laramie again, and, basically calls out to Vibert, says, is this all you have for me? I will destroy whoever you've put in front of me. And Vibert comes out and basically says, don't worry, Vengeance. At Back in Black, you'll face your gravest challenge, and you will fail. And this gets a 67. Oh, you'll fail, I guarantee it. And that gets a 67. And overall, it gets a 49. Which, not the best show, but not the worst show ever. No popularity changes. And let's see if there's any mail or anything else interesting happening. And then we'll move on to Back in Black. Survey says, okay, no new goals. So yeah, let's look at our production real quick. Oh, okay, let's see here. PPWs, okay. So RPWs at large and medium, but we're better than them in broadcast. Okay. How much would it cost? Let me just look at our finances. Okay, so we lost 13,000 with that show, which is unfortunate. So that's interesting. Oh, also, of course, merchandising. Let's go ahead and upgrade that. There we go. So I'll have to think about that, but I'll be back in just a second with Back in Black. So see you in just a moment with that show. Now it's time for Dave Back in Black, our first big show here in the East Coast War. So let's get rolling as we're in front of a little over 900 people in Philly. And we start with Nemesis. We'll welcome us to Back in Black, just like Joey Styles would. putting over the big matches, including the Dave Extreme title match. And Vengeance facing Phil Vibert's challenger. And this gets a 50. Then we go into our opening match where we're in about a decent reaction from the crowd. But Subpar Wrestling, Tyrone versus Prex defeated Monty Walker in 10-20 by pinfall. It says we're using the ropes for leverage, but basically it's a quote-unquote clean match where both guys are doing their best. Prex does his power moves, Walker does some flying, but in the end, Prex drills him with a chair and gets the pinfall victory. This gets a 40. Monty Walker gets a 38. T-Pex gets a 38. And then T-Pex poses afterwards, which gets a 42. Then we have in a quick squash, the Animals defeat Michael Cook and JJ Coles, in 5:36 when Big Cat Bandon pinned Michael Cook with a big pounce. Big Cat just rolls over everyone. This gets a 35, Wolverine gets a 50, Brandon gets a 34, JJ Coles gets a 21, Michael Cook gets a 13. The Animals sort of pose over their fallen victims afterwards, which gets a 34. Then afterwards we have Henry Lee versus Officer Hardway, and about a deep reaction from the crowd. But Subpar Wrestling, Henry Lee defeats Officer Hardway in a 24 by pinfall with an Silent Buster, which I'm imagining is some sort of like Falcon Arrow or Brain Buster. And this gets a 37 as Lee gets a 42, Hardway gets a 25, and basically just a quick win for the babyface over the mid-card heel. And then Lee Celebrates gets a 62. Then we move forward. We're in our tag team title match, as in a bout didn't have much heat, but Terrible Wrestling, Black Murder defeat the Darkness Wars in 11:59 with Elijah Back pinned Raw Darkness with Soul Train. This is a crazy, chairs, a table gets involved, title belts, probably some sort of Singapore cane, everything gets involved. But in the end, Elijah Back hits the big move to get the pinfall victory. This gets a 29, Morris Mickey gets a 27, Elijah Back gets a 31, Dark Raw gets a 31, Jay Knox just gets a 31, and yeah, and there you go. And then Black Murder Celebrating afterward gets a 32. Then again, another match as Chris Caulfield tries to prove his work to the Dave fans. 4-1 defeats Chris Caulfield in 5:06 by pinfall with the chokeslam. So he lasts a little longer this time, but 4-1 still ends up hitting with the chokeslam. And this gets a 17. Caulfield gets a 29. 4-1 gets a 28. And then Caulfield dies again, getting a chokeslam as the crowd chants one more time. Gets a 33. Now we're getting a little closer to the big matches. As Eric Tyler comes in, has an in-ring promo where he says it's pathetic that he doesn't have a match tonight, but he doesn't expect any better of Dave Management, who is continually wants a bunch of hardcore freaks out there. And then after a moment, Roy Stevens comes out and basically challenges Tyler. Roy Stevens is basically an undercard guy who gets killed, and the fans have sort of gotten behind him unironically, so they chant for him to face Tyler. And then Tyler sort of smirks and agrees to a match, which in this whole promo gets a 69. And then the actual match, in a poor match, Eric Tyler defeats Roy Stevens in 608 by submission with the tradition lift. This gets a 54. Eric Tyler gets a 65 because he's awesome. Roy Stevens gets a 13 because, well, he's Roy Stevens and he's not over it all. But, just basically, Roy Stevens gets a little bit of burst of offense pretty end, but then Stevens just basically tears him apart for 5 minutes straight before finally trapping him in the submission. And then Tyler keeps hold on for a couple more minutes before letting it go to the boos of the crowd, and that gets a 40. Then we have, in a bout that had decent reaction in the crowd with Terrible Wrestling, Freddie Datsun defeated Finn Tanner in 7:46 by pinfall the Patriot Press. This gets a 36, as they didn't click, which is unfortunate. Datsun gets a 34. Finn Tanner gets a 29. Was there anything else that hurt this? Let's see here. Inconsistency, all out. Okay, so worker chemistry. Okay. Because, Freddie Datsun gets the big win over Finn Tanner as it's back and forth match, big brawl. Just fighting all over, big brawl, big moves, but, Datson's able to hit the Patriot Press and get the huge pinfall victory over Finn Tanner. But then afterwards, Datsun rolls out to celebrate, and that gives Tanner just enough time to grab Datson's manager, Miss Bliss, from who's on, basically, by the ringside area, pull her in, and hit a big old, hit it, not quite a pile driver, but some sort of suplex, leaving her down and out as Tanner rolls out laughing as Datsun comes in, to help, help his manager up. And that gets a 41, and there you go. Then we have a, promo as Vengeance comes out and says, where's your man? And Phil Wyatt comes out with Inuit, which is weird because Inuit's a lower mid-card, fun point heel. And Vengeance just laughs and says, this is your challenger. And Viper just smirks. And this gets a 54. And then the actual match is about the decent in the crowd. But subpar wrestling, Vengeance killed Inuit in 602 by pinfall of Vengeance drop. This gets a 50. Vengeance gets a 54. Inuit gets a 21. Then as Vengeance is sort of yelling at Viper about, how, come on, this is really the best you got. When out of nowhere comes goddamn Nemesis. You can imagine Mr. going crazy. That's Nemesis. He doesn't even work here. He works up in New York for Supreme. What the fuck is he doing here? And he just destroys Viper, Vengeance from behind, hits him with his big move, which I think is an F5, and Gilbert slides in, standing behind Nemesis, and just laughs. As the beatdown continues, this gets a 65. As Nemesis makes his debut here in Dave. And then in the main event, which gets a 58, and he both had great heat and good wrestling, J.B. Morgan defeated Johnny Martin in 1534 by submission with a cross-Atlantic stretch after, it says, interference from Phil Vibert, but basically, Morgan just cheats and then is able to lock on the hold. And J. Morgan wins the Dave Extreme title. This gets a 58. J.D. Morgan gets a 50. Johnny Morton gets a 58. And then afterwards, the show ends with Morgan and Vibert celebrating. Then out comes Nemesis to stand beside them. There's a little bit of tension between Morgan and Nemesis, but they stand together, and the show ends with a 64. So show increased our popularity in one region as we get a 52 overall. So let's give a little bit of great performance, and who else deserves a great performance? And Vengeance. Let's see if there's any other mail or interesting news. Survey says... Okay, nope, just respect. Production change, yep, okay. And then if we look at our finance, not great, Bob. Not great. But, we'll get there eventually. We're losing most of our money because of production, unfortunately. We basically would be running even if not for that whole production thing, which, what can you do? But be back in a second with our next Highway to the Danger Zone. As if we look at events, basically have two more events. Then there's Counterculture, March into Battle, Rock and Roll Over, Total Disruption, The Extreme Doubleheader, Exit Wound, Attitude Adjustment, Alternate Staircase, Rustler Rave, Lord of the Rings, Crystal with the Devil. And for the quick look, for the title, the main reason why I changed the title over is Martin's held the title for a couple months, and it seemed like a good time to change it over to Morgan. And also gives Morgan's talking point, he's the first 4-time Dave Extreme champion. And yeah, there you go. But I'll be back in just a second with the first show on the road to counterculture. Okay, welcome to the post Back in Black Highway to the Danger Zone, as we start out with, of course, the explanation, as Nemesis, Phil Vibert, and JD Morgan all come out to the ring. Nemesis starts out by shooting on SWF, says he was trying to bring change to them, and they didn't want to listen, so now he's here in Dave, where these fans will learn that the revolution has been started by Phil Vibert, and even if they don't like him, they will learn to love him, and that Viper is the one who could lead the revolution along with him and make the changes that need to be made. And even though these fans talk about being hardcore and alternative, they were hugging their Sam Strong buddies a couple years ago. So I don't care about you. I'm here to change what needs to be changed. And it doesn't matter what you think or who you think I should be aligned with, because I'm here to create destruction and bring a revolution. And then all of a sudden, Michael Cook, of course, our lower card sort of never say die jumping resort, tries to attack a Nemesis, and Phil Pirate shrugs and says ring the bell. So this gets a 58. Good stuff. And then we go to the match where Nemesis kills Michael Cook in 342 by pinfall, the Nemesis arrow, which is the F5. So this is just the Nemesis basically no-selling Cook's blows for a couple minutes, and then just tearing him apart, and this gets a 48. And of course, Nemesis then it's another Nemesis arrow, which gets a 48 as well. Then we have a backstage promo where basically Tanner says he isn't sorry about what happened to Miss Bliss. You get in this business, you get in this ring, and you deserve anything that happens to you, bitch. And then, if Dexter wants to cry about it, well, he can try to beat me once again, but he got lucky last time, and I will not fail again. So this gets a 37, solid stuff. Then we go to match, as in a poor match. The Animals drew with Darkness Warriors in 9:55 following a double countout. This gets a 27. Wolverine carried the match in terms of performance. Brandon gets a 31. Wolverine gets a 51. While Darkness gets a 23. Jake Darkness gets a 32. Again, this is another mayhem match where everybody just brawls all over. And then it was penalized for finish because, of course, fans don't like double countouts. But come on, it's a wild brawl that goes out of control. The ref has to call it at some point. And then they continue fighting, which gets a 39. There you go. Then we have an Eric Taylor in-ring where he talks about his lack of competition. And, he says, if Nemesis wants to leave a revolution, well, I'm already leading a revolution, but it's a revolution of tradition. And that's because of 74, because Tyler is awesome on the mic. Then we go to our next match, which is Officer Hardaway defeated Lucas Hale in 443 by pinfall of Hard Knock Life. Just a quick squash win for Hardaway. This gets a 10, because yikes. Hardaway gets a 30, Lucas Hale gets a 9, then Hardaway arresting Hale gets a 31. Move on to our next segment, which is in an abysmal match. Monty Walker and Roy Stevens defeat the Hot Bodies in 8:36 when Monty Walker submitted Rocky Hardbody. This gets a 27, Roy Stevens gets a 13 because he's not that over. Monty Walker gets a 43, and Hot Bodies get a 10 and a 12 each. And then afterwards, Walker and Stevens celebrates, which gets a 34. Then we have in a terrible match, 4-1 squashes Inuit in 516 by pinfall the chokeslam. This gets a 10. Jesus, that's worse than I thought. Inuit gets an 18. 4-1 gets a 27. And then afterwards, Chris Caulfield tries to attack 4-1 with a chair a couple times. And Aldis is really pissed off 4-1. But Caulfield escapes before 4-1 can go after him, which gets a 27. And then it's main event time. We're at a 37. Which is actually worse than I expected. I guess Lee. Okay, so the match was it was too long, and Lee was exhausted towards the end, so okay. But anyway, G. Morgan gets a 50, Henry Lee gets a 41, and in a clean victory, J.D. Morgan defeats Henry Lee in 15:51 by submission to the cross-Atlantic stretch. This gets a 37, and yeah. And then afterwards, yep, I know. And okay. And then, of course, in the post-match, Johnny Martin, the recently dethroned Extreme Champion, comes out and starts brawling with J.D. Morgan, but out comes Nemesis and grabs Martin, kick, wham, Nemesis arrow right in the middle ring, crowd boos, and there we go, 57. And overall, we get a 43. So, not our best show, but not our worst show out either. So So let's see if there's any mail, and then move on to the next show. And this gets okay. So Morgan was injured. Let's see if he's actually out for any long period. I'm going to guess, yeah, it was 2 days. He got a foot contusion. Basically, Henry Lee stepped on his foot for a second, and then okay. So yeah, let's go ahead and bring him in as a face, Joy Poison, and this guy, I believe, because he's teaming, yeah. I'm bringing some undercard people just to bring in some undercard people, along with some other signings. Because, yeah, I mean, it's not like we don't have a weak roster, but we have a very sort of feast or famine roster. Like, there's our top of the card, you know, there's our top of the card people who are pretty decent, and then there's, like, Plex and Monty Walker, and then there's a whole bunch of crap, unfortunately. But I'll be back in a second with the next Highway to the Danger Zone as we continue on the East Coast Wars. All right, it's time for our second Highway to the Danger Zone after Back in Black, as we're canoeing on the road to counterculture. Well, at least we will go partly down the road, then the AI will take over the rest. We're under 464 people in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, as a show starts out with a match as a battle at distraction from the crowd with subpar wrestling. Johnny Martin defeats Kurt Laramie 6-7 by pinfall, a twist on the rocks. This gets a 47. Martin gets a 60. Laramie gets an 18. Simple squash to start, give Johnny Martin a win. Then cuts a promo, what he basically says, Nemesis can talk about a revolution all he wants. Well, I already started this revolution. I already brought these fans, and these fans know that I'm the extreme icon. I'm the heart and soul of this movement. And some bleeper who wants to show up, team up with that yuppie bleep head again, and think he can take over my company. Well, he's got another thing coming. And Morgan, don't think I forget about you either, buddy. 55, solid promo. As we move on, as in a debut in an abysmal match, the Ghost Walkers defeat the Hot Bodies in 601 when Tavi Lauren pinned Rodney Hotbody with a kneeling pile driver. This gets a 22. Solid win. As Ghost Walkers are basically a Native American tag team from Canada. Brought them in just because, get them on the roster, and give them some wins, as I think they're the type of tag team that would have shown up around this time. And plus, I need a babyface tag team. And even though this is still Dave and, who's a face or heel doesn't matter that much, you still want to have some actual baby faces on the roster. But anyway, Vigilante Hawk gets a 28, Ty Lauren gets a 24, and Hot Buddies get a 13 and 10, and at least their gimmicks gets a great and 22 over for the match, and then Ghostwalker Celebrating, which gets a 26. And then T-Plex Flexus talks about he's the 8th wonder of Dave, and then out comes Henry Lee and just starts fighting with him, and basically the ring bell rings, and there we have a match. That's how it works with Dave. Just start fighting somebody, and the bell will probably ring. And this gets a 53. And then in a decent match, Henry Lee defeats Tyrone vs. Pex in 10-14 by pinfall with an Asylum Buster. This gets a 47. Lee was off his game, and Pex was slightly tiring, but still solid match. Pex gets a 45, but Lee gets a 46. But after the match, as Lee gets up and races arm to the crowd, Pex comes behind, attacks him, and locks him in a hold for a couple minutes, and then stands up and flexes again. And this gets a 38. Then in about a detraction from the crowd with subpar wrestling, Wolverine and World Darkness killed each other. Again, this was our mayhem match, with just, chairs, some hurricanes, a table bump. Wolverine defeats World Darkness 942 by pinfall with them all. And of course, both members of the tag team ran in, and this feud continues, and this gets a 39. So Raw gets a 23, and Wolverine gets a 50. And then afterwards, we have a Eric Tyler challenge, where he calls out and makes an open challenge, and out comes none other than Flapjack Flanagan. Again, for those who don't know, Cornellverse 1995, Flanagan's a former older SWF guy, who's, basically was on the indies, and I brought him basically because, this type of, older, former WWF guy is the exact type of guy that was brought into ECW right at the beginning to sort of shore up the roster, and, obviously he's just brought in and bringing the numbers, but, so, Tyler accepts the challenge, and this gets a 59. And in the actual match, Eric Tyler defeats Flapjack Flanagan in 11:45 by submission after blatantly cheating. So Flanagan, who's more of a brawler, gets, some sort of, measure of attack. But in the end, Tyler cheats, slides, puts him in the tradition lift, and Flanagan has to, submit. And this gets a 56. And then afterwards, Tyler keeps the hold on, but out comes Freddie Datson to break it up. And then afterwards, Datson and Flapjack Flanagan shake hands to the pop. And this gets a 45. And then out comes Damon Carruthers, who has a dual sport. So basically, Carruthers was a former football player who became a wrestler in the SWF. He's in his mid-40s, so again, this is another upper card, former upper card SWF guy coming in doing one last run. He gets a 52, and then he comes out to face JD Morgan in a match that gets a 44. And about that good heat and wrestling, JD Morgan defeats Damon Carruthers in 13-20 by pinfall. After Filva Ebert interfered, but I imagine Morgan cheating to win, walloping with the title belt and getting the pinfall victory. Carruthers gets a 48, J. Morgan gets a 45. Let me see here if there's anything else. Yeah, no, that's it. I know. And then, basically Nemesis and Morgan have a beatdown. When the lights go off and the lights come back on, it says vengeance, but it's vengeance. Vengeance is back. And he has J.D. Morgan. He pulls him up. Chokeslam. Nemesis rolls out, and there's a stare down between Nemesis and Vengeance as the show goes off the air, and this gets a 63. And overall, we get a 46. So solid show. Debut people on the roster, and there we go. As we finish this, let's see if there's any what the mail looks like, and then we'll go on to our final show of the month. And then what we'll do is we'll do a recap of what the other companies did in January. We'll find out where we finished in the Astro East Coast War. Then we'll look at what the other companies did, in the East Coast War, and then we'll go from there. So Morgan's fully fit, and there we go. And yeah, so we'll be back in just a moment with the actual last Highway to Danger Zone before we move on to another company. So we'll be back with you in just a moment. And we are back in Philly for the final Highway Danger Zone. Whoa, words are hard. For the final Highway to the Danger Zone of the month, as we start with Vengeance in the ring, and he destroys Kurt Laramie in 544 with the Vengeance drop. This gets a 44. Vengeance gets a 57. Kurt Laramie gets a 17. Then he has an in-ring where basically Vengeance talks about Nemesis. You talk about a revolution. You talk about these fans don't know what they're talking about. Well, Nemesis, you are nothing but the next victim on my road of darkness, and I will take you out one way or the other. Nemesis comes out and says, Vengeance, do you think just because you wear a mask and talks in scary tones, I'm scared of you? Motherfucker, I'll fight you right now. And then the brawl goes on, and there's the fight, and yeah, this feud continues, and it gets a 70. Good stuff. Then, in a bout of terrible wrestling noise in crowd heat, the Ghostwalkers defeat Inuit and William Fletcher in 7:49, when Tavernelli defeated William Fletcher with a ghost dance. Good win for, just building up this undercard babyface team, as Vigilante Hawk gets a 33, Tavernelli gets a 28, Fletcher gets a 9, and Inuit gets a 23. And good stuff. And then they celebrate, which gets a 27. Then we have a Damon Carruthers in the ring, where basically, he says, I thought I could walk in here and dominate, but I have to admit, last week, I got tricked. I got my ass beat, but I'm going to be back on top before you can start it. So bring out my next opponent. 40, not the worst promo, not the best promo either. And about a decent reaction from the crowd, but subpar wrestling. Damon Carruthers defeated Officer Hardway in 5:35 by pinfall the flying shoulder tackle. Solid win for Carruthers, as match itself gets a 36. Carruthers gets a 47, and Hardway gets a 26. And then Carruthers celebrates, which gets a 47. And then a terrible match, Jay Darkness defeats Big Cat Brandon and other mayhem in a 30 by pinfall to Fade to Black, following interference from Raw Darkness. During the match, we also had Wolverine accidentally hit Big Cat Brandon. So basically what happens here is Wolverine comes in, goes after Jay, but Wolverine, Jay gets out of the way. Wolverine nails Big Cat Brandon, and then Raw Darkness follows up with a chair shot or belt shot of his own, or not belt shot, but a Singapore Cane or cookie pan or whatever you want, cookie sheet or whatever you want to say, shot of his own, and Jake Darkness gets the big win over Big Cat Brandon. Brandon gets a 29, Jake Darkness gets a 31, and then afterwards, they continue to fight, but all of a sudden, our tag team champions show up, and they take out both teams with chairs and other, assorted things around the ringside area, as they take them both out and stand tall as this feud continues, and this gets a 33. And then Chris Caulfield intros his new manager, who is Emma Chase, of all people. Emma Chase comes in and says, yes, I know, all you idiot, numbskull, barely human, barely above Cro-Magnon fans are slobbering all over me, but I'm managing Chris Caulfield because I know he is the future of Dave, he's the future of wrestling, and he will show that tonight. and this gets a 30. And then in the match, in a abysmal match, that's sad, Chris Caulfield defeated Joey Poison in a 49 pinfall, the danger drop after Emma Chase interferes. So Chase, sort of distracts Poison for just long enough for Caulfield to hit his DVD. And this gets a 19. Poison debuted as the undercard guy. Poison gets a 15. Caulfield gets a 19, and Emma Chase did good work at ringside. And then Caulfield, so basically, celebrates being hardcore, which gets a 33. Then we have our actual main event, which is in a decent match. Flapjack Flanagan and Freddie Datsun defeats Eric Tyler and Vin Tanner in 15:03, when Freddie Datsun gets a big win over Eric Tyler with the Patriot Press. Eric Tyler carried this match in terms of in-ring performance. This gets a 54. Datsun gets a 45. Flapjack gets a 42. Tanner gets a 36. And Tyler gets a 65 because he's awesome. And then the babyfaces celebrate along with Miss Bliss, while Tyler fumes in the ring, and this gets a 52. And overall, the show itself gets a 50. So good stuff. So yeah, what I'll do after I see if there's any interesting email is I'll book to the end of the month. We'll go over what the others. We'll see how we did in the regional wars, and then we'll go over what the other 3 companies did, and then that'll be the video. So let me see here. Yeah, production change. So I'll be back in just a second with that. So, welcome to the end of the month, our first month of East Coast Wars. First, let's look at Malice in Wonderland. So, Rip Cord defeated Dusty Streets and Ricky Paggiano for the world title. Whistler defeated Romeo Heartthrob, and Sam Strong was not even on the show. Good job well, he had an interview, but good job by AI. Really good job. Anyway, let's look over the mail. So we finished first out of 4 companies, which means their attendance for day will be boosted for 5%. So, yeah, if we look at the battles, so in the Tri-State, we got a 53, XFW got a 49, NYCW got a 44, and PBW got a 38. So again, let's look at the other companies and how they did real quick. So let's start with XFW, let's look at their, let's look at their events. Show history. So they had the Insane Heat defend his world title in a 54. Danger Kid and Arthur Alvarez Simpson and Sean Gonzalez defeated the Guru and the Nation of Filth in a 50. Big Dumb Candle defeated I Butcher and Chris Warwick in a 48. And some undercard stuff. Then we had Insane Heat defeat Ultimate Rando in a First Blood match. We had Frankie Future defeat Genghis Ran and some undercard matches, including Jimmy Cox and Blackjack Robbins winning some matches. We had Insane Heat win a tables match against Frankie Future, Arthur Oliver Simpson, and Genghis Ran. We had Big Trouble, Sean Gonzalez, and El Tornado defeat Guru Nation of Filth, and some undercard stuff, including Badman Boone and Hardcore Killer becoming the tag champions. Okay. And then we had Insane Heat defeat Shane Gonzalez in a ladder match and to retain the world title. Elton Rando defeat Arthur El Salvador Simpson, and Bud Miller, Frankie Future, and Big Dunk defeat the Genghis Ran and the Nation of Filth. And then, some interesting undercard stuff, including the Nasties of I Butcher and Blackjack Robbins defeating Hardcore Killer and Danger Kid. Let's see here, do they have any actual storylines? Which I'm blanking on where that is. Oh, feuds. Nope. Okay, no storylines. Okay, if we move to Philly Pro Power, we had, let's look at their show history. Okay, so they had Rick Sanders and the Man Crushers, who are, Crusher Carl Arf and Man Mountain Cahill defeat Jesse Christian and the Skinner Brothers at a 40. Brent Hill and Chester Stein defeat Stuart Ferdinand and the Punisher in a 45. We had Stuart Ferdinand and the Man Crushers defeat Lionheart Lawson, Brent Hill, and Chris Rockwell. Then we had the Skinner Brothers defeat the Dallas Wrecking Crew of Rick Sanders and the Punisher to retain the tag titles. Then we had Whistler defeat Crusher Karloff to retain the Tri-State Championship. Then we had Man Mountain Cahill and the Punisher defeat Chester Stain and Lionheart Lawson. And then Brent Hill would defeat Henry Bennett. Okay. And then we had Whistler defeat Man Mountain Cahill to retain the title. Crusher Karloff defeating Chester Stein and Brent Hill winning a match. Okay. So, not the worst shows, not the best shows ever. XFW seems a little more interesting. And then last but not least, we have Rapid Pro Wrestling. So again, if we look at, if we remind you, so they just have TV. And then if we look at their, not their events, but their show history. We had, okay, so they start with a 32. So we had Pete Hillbilly, Alex Braun, and Steve Flash defeated Nakajima Fujino and the Ghosts. The Ghosts are who exactly? Okay, Phantom Freak and Phantom Zero, right? Okay, and Brent Hill win a squash match. Then we had Steve Flash defeat Brent Hill to retain the world title in a 51, and brings over Braun, defeat Officer Heatwaves and Pete Hillbilly to retain the tag titles. Then we also had Officer Eway, Alex Braun, and Steve Flash defeat Jungle Jack and the Ghosts, and Brent Hill defeats Sammy Back. Then Steve Flash retained the world title over Steel Silver Shark, and then all that. And if we look at their product real quick, because I'm not, okay, so they basically, yeah, they need at least, 80% matches, 20% angles. Okay, so that makes sense. So yeah, some interesting stuff. So next up, so the next thing I will be doing is just, because I'm doing alphabetical this first time, is Philly Pro Wrestling. So that'll be interesting because they have Brent Hill. So they're basically like, if you look at their product again, for those who don't remember, their product is basically modern throwback. So events, is 95 and 5. TV shows is 60 and 40, and yeah, fans will expect more matches to be quite lengthy, which is unfortunate because of the people on this roster, and no overbooked matches. So basically totally something different from Dave. Like, Dave was all insanity and insanity and wackiness and cutting edge stuff. Well, Philly Pro is basically interesting things. But that's it for now. So this is the first month. Like I said, next. So what I'll do is I'll add myself as Marcus McKing. Then I'll remove myself as Nemesis. We'll see how Dave does without me. But that's it for now. So if you enjoyed this, go ahead and give this a like. Comment below on what you're joining on. Subscribe to our channel for lots of content, including this, my WCW 2001 series, now after Halloween Havoc 2003 with Eddie Guerrero as the world champion. My WCW 1993 series with Eric Bischoff as the head. My Women's Wrestling 2010 series. My MLW Revolution series now in 2005 as I'm dealing with Steve Corino having a broken leg for 5 months, and Loki as my champion. And also the continuation of my Cornellverse 2016 and TEW 2020 series with TCW. But that's it for now, so talk to you later, and adios.